Hi everyone. So the original idea that we discussed a while ago with Philip and Julia was that we would like to share a little bit our experiences with developing digital teaching material, and we were trying to have a focus on low stake things that can be easily, more or less easily implemented, but we'll see that this is also not always the case. And I hope we can discuss a little bit also your experiences with developing teaching material, what are the obstacles and how can we go about that. And what I will focus on today is how we use two Moodle activities to develop teaching material in the biology department. And for this, I'm going to share quickly my screen. And first of all, just to dive into this topic, we were always, or a lot of people always ask, why are you actually making online teaching material if so much is available in the web and you have textbooks, you have videos, why do you make things on your own? And for us, a few of the most important topics, or actually reasons, are that in some cases we do not find a suitable textbook, or the textbook is not up to date, so we are actually forced to develop something on our own. And what we always sometimes feel is that in the textbooks the emphasis is not always on the content that is difficult to grasp, so we like to emphasize in our own teaching material content that we know from students, for example, that this is a difficult content, and we would like to emphasize this even more, and to specifically introduce the missing links that are sometimes missing in the textbooks, because there's a lot of information, but it's not always very well linked to each other. What we also try to do is in our materials to address misconceptions, if we know of those, that we actually actively talk about those misconceptions and try to overcome them. We also are quite happy with making the teaching material customized so that we can align it well with the curriculum, so we can refer in the teaching material to a lecture they have heard before. We can show material from the previous lectures just to refresh the students of what they have actually already heard. We use our self-made teaching material mainly in the bachelor courses, where we have very often heterogeneous student cohorts, and we can use this material also to design such ramp-up courses for students with different backgrounds, so that we can get them all on the same page before they go into the lecture, for example, during the self-study in a flipped or blended class. A lot of the modules that we develop, we try to develop them such that we can actually recycle them. So we try to make them small, to have smaller modules that we can actually take out of one course and put them into another course. They also sometimes serve as a refresher in the later courses in the curriculum, so that students can actually look at them again, or we use some of the modules to refresh their memories later. And the two activities that we use on Moodle quite extensively that I will show you today to develop this kind of content is the Moodle activity lesson, which allows to build learning paths for the students. And if you want to go really deeply into it, you can even introduce some gaming, because you can make students choose options on their own and direct them how you want them to go through the activity. They can decide by themselves how they want to go on, and so on. Generally, the Moodle activity lesson is a series of interconnected pages that are content pages and question pages that you can mix as you like. You can insert images, audio, videos, and various question types are possible within this activity. And you have a linear version, which is the most easy and straightforward thing to set up, where students follow a defined path, but depending on how they answer to a question, for example, they would either have to repeat this question, they could be redirected to a previous page, they could be redirected to a different content page, which has maybe an extra explanation, or in the correct answer version, they can be directed to the next page. And this is how they actually move through the lesson. And you can make the interconnections of the different pages as you think they are useful. And the branched version, which is the more fun, but also more complicated version to set up, allows you to really switch between, for example, 2 different models or 2 or 3 different scenarios, which students decide at the beginning actively which ones they want to start with. They can be either interconnected, or they can be different scenarios from which the students, where the students just follow one branch and they may follow later the others, or they may talk to other students who have followed a different path. So we actually mostly work with a linear version, which is more easy to set up. And I'm going to show you now an example how we use it and what kind of interactive elements we use in this lesson. Now I need to go to Moodle. And this is how the students would see such a lesson. They would start with something like an introduction. You can insert a video if you want. This is something about the structure and function of a eukaryotic cell. So students would get a little bit of an introduction to the topic at the beginning. You can even, if you want, have the students shown how much of the lesson they have already done. Let me switch to English. And then they will see how much they have already completed. So they go to the next slide and they go to the next page. And then at a certain point, they can see that there's a question. So for example, this is a multiple choice question. If they choose the wrong question, they will get the feedback that this is wrong. You can even give a feedback why it is wrong, and you can have them continue and do the question again or direct them to a different question. If they are correct, then they go on with they get the correct answer, this is correct, and they go on with the next page, which is again an introduction to the next topic. What we also often use, either in this kind of activity, but we can use it in any other kind of activity, is what we call activate your brain. These are questions that are not to be answered with a multiple choice question, but something where students have to think, maybe connect to a different lecture they have heard before, just to make them think about what they have read and not just read the text without digesting it. So with these activate your brain things, we have a little question where they can think about something. And if they want to see the answer, they can click on this little icon here and they can see the answer. You can put a picture if you want, you can put a video, anything else you want to put. And students can go on in the activity, and they will probably have another of these activate your brains. This is an activity that we have inserted via the function glossary, which I can show later if this is of interest. But this is a very nice function to make students think about the content. And if you go on, you will have more text, you will have different questions that the students can answer. So you can see here that you can also have a matching question. You can also introduce short answer or numerical questions in this kind of activity, so to have a little bit of a variety. At the end, they will come to the end of the lesson. They will also see how much they have completed. They will also see how many points they have received if you have inserted this as you for the students to see. Okay, I will not go to the end of this lesson, but what I want to show as well is the activity test that we use a lot also to develop teaching material. And I just want to quickly show something, not too much, go too much into detail, but just to remind you that the Moodle test is not simply a multiple choice question database, but you have many, many different question types that you can use. And it's actually really very much fun to be creative and to use these different question types. For example, drag and drop for labeling. You can use fill in the blanks. You can even have the freehand drawing where people, for example, in our cases, they draw on a picture of a gel, so of an experiment that they get. They have to label it, for example. And students really like this. freehand drawing a lot. This is all possible in this activity test. So you have many more question types that you have in the other activity that I just showed. You can also guide learning a little bit with the test. For example, you can make questions dependable on each other. Somebody can only answer the next question if he has answered the first question. You can also play around with the navigation. You can make a fixed path so that students cannot go back to different questions, or they have a free navigation depending on really how you want to structure your activity. You can randomly assign questions from a question pool if you don't want students to always see the same question, all of them see the same question. You can have a pool with the similar questions from which randomly questions are assigned. You can show the answers immediately after handing in the quiz or just after finishing the complete quiz. This also depends on your setting that you would like to use. You can also make the availability of the quiz depending on other activities, for example, that they have to have completed another activity to be able to see the quiz. They can only access it as a group, and there are also many other availabilities that you can choose here for the students to follow or to actually start this quiz. Glossary, the glossary function is also possible, the one that I just showed you that we use for the Activate Your Brain. You can also use it in the test. You can insert videos and images also. And I will try to, no, it doesn't want to move to my right. Okay. I will quickly show you one that how we use the test, for example, in a setup where we wanted to make a virtual practical course. During Corona, students could not come to the lab, but so therefore we organized some kind of virtual labs for them, but it can be used as a practical, it can be used as a wrap-up for students after a certain lecture, for example, on the topic. And we have reused these virtual labs now for some of the lectures where students actually wrap up the content that they have heard in the lecture by solving such a practical. And you can see here, you can have text pages, you can have questions that they have to do. You can have different questions here too, as a fill in the gap, where students kind of digest what they have just read and learned. You can also insert videos, so they can have a look at the videos here. I use a lot the Joby videos, which I think are really a great resource that we have at ETH available. And there are open questions that you can insert. We usually do it such that we have a possible or a kind of a model answer that students get afterwards, so that they know what the question was more or less about. And as you go on, you will see there are different activities here. For example, they have to design the actual experiment that they would do. They have to decide which is the first step they would do, the second step, the third step, and the fourth step of this experiment. This is also something that you can easily set up with those questions. And then they go on later and they analyze material. Here, in that case, they analyze the bacterial plates with the phages, and they have to decide which one is the one desirable for their experiments. Okay, I will try to go back. Yeah, it works. And these are really the two tools we extensively use in our courses in different settings. But what I would like to show now is just at the end a little bit how we actually use how we design a workflow, how we follow a workflow for designing this teaching material. And this is maybe also something we can later on discuss a little bit further. So first of all, I have to say we work very closely together with students. We have students assistants that work with us in a team, and they are a very valuable source of feedback. They show us missing links. They point to difficult items that they have encountered themselves while going through these lectures. And with their feedback, We try to define what the content is, where would be a video possible, which exercises are useful. And we try to collect all kinds of different material that we might use to put in to build a storyboard where we actually really put the different items. We think what will be on what page, what question will come where, what kind of activities we want to connect with that activity. Before we choose the tool, sometimes we also just do a PDF where we have an interactive PDF where students can also click and see answers, for example, in the PDF. And in the technical implementation, depending on which tool we use, we again very much profit from our students because they are trained in Moodle and they can help us actually building from the storyboard the different activities that you have just seen. We also think about what kind of interactivity do we want to do, what is possible within the activities. We work a lot with giving students feedback, no, this is wrong, why, and so on, please try again. And we also use, as I showed you, these activate your brain questions. There are also other activities that we can link to. Maria's points is something where we ask students what remained unclear. We use for this the feedback version, the feedback activity in Moodle, because this allows also anonymous feedback. So this is something students appreciate if they can leave their comments anonymously. But also chat is used often, or forum, and the glossary, as I just showed you. And in the end, before we give the product to the students, we have our student assistants again have a look at the material. We get again feedback, and then we usually are quite happy with the product. And this is then when we actually use it in our courses. Okay, this is in essence what I wanted to show.
Great. Thank you very much, Katja, for these examples and also for this great overview of the workflow on how you design it. I really like how you put things together, and especially involving the students several times in the cycle to give you feedback on the whole conceptualization, but then also on the finished product. So really cool. Are there any immediate questions for Katja? So please, as
Katja,
always.
Could you show us a freehand question? The one they need to.
Yeah, I can, but it will take a little bit of time before I find it. Maybe I'll look for it and I show it to you later so that we don't use so much time now. But I'll look for it and show it at the end of the refresh teaching.
Thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions? Raise your virtual hand or please just unmute yourself and ask away. We do have a minute or two for a question.
How long was your learning curve in coming up with this workflow until it worked for you? I figured that you have to have some experience until you can bring all the people together to produce such a module.
Yes, that's true, and we also had to train the students quite intensively on that. But we are lucky to have some student assistants for us for 2 years or maybe even 3 years. And this is a very valuable resource, of course, because we can use them on a longer time. So the investment of the training is worth it. For the feedback, I think the feedback from the students, this is something you can really easily get, and they can very easily point to difficult items and missing links. So this is something that I think you can really profit a lot from having students maybe even answering to your questions or telling them to pinpoint in the PDFs what is unclear, which will also help you to find this out if you don't have direct contact or direct access to students to talk to them. I think this is also something we often do, or we ask them in the forum, please leave us comments, what has remained unclear, and then we try to relate it back to the activities and to the material.
I guess it's also quite a bit of trial and error in the process of how you get the feedback from the students, how you collect it and then integrate it. And we have another question from Lucas.
Hi, Katja.
Hi, Lucas.
I have a question at the beginning. You mentioned that the reason one reason is why you do your own material is misconceptions of the students. And my question is how you detect these misconceptions.
Yeah, so we are lucky because we have some research going on at the side on learning sciences where we detect misconceptions from students. So we know some of them from there, but also it's actually not so difficult when you talk to some students and you ask them some questions to really understand what are the misconceptions. I think from talking to the students, we really learn a lot how they think and what are the difficult items in their heads. So maybe it's not a misconception as it's written in stone, but it's something that they have really misunderstood for some reason. And this is something we then take up and try to really make a point in our teaching material just about that point, because we know that a lot of students have problems with this, which would not usually maybe be apparent to us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question and the reply, of course, as well. And we have one more question, Samira.
Yes, thank you, Katja, for this presentation. I have a question about the number of students who are enrolled in this course and whether this new mechanism would allow more students to be enrolled, and what would be then the maximum number of students?
Okay, maybe just to be clear, the students that I talked about here, the students that help us developing the material, these are not the students who take this course. These are students that are master students or advanced students who took that course some time ago, but they are working with us to help us with this development. So these are not the students who take the course. In the course, those modules that I just showed, we use them in different courses. We use them in courses with 100 students. We have a course with 450 students that is using these activities. But it is really separate. Those students who take the activities and those who work on designing the activities are not the same.